Now, in the previous video, we left off right about here, and we had rendered this out into an image by hitting the render button up here, render image, and now we want to move on to making an animation with it. So here we have we still have our whole setup here with all these paths and curves over on this side. Now we can go and play around with some of the animation elements, which is going to be using this timeline down here and some keyframes. So I'm going to go back into material or viewport shading, whatever, material preview, just because it makes things move a little bit faster. You can also go into here. That's very fast too. But okay, so I want to animate these paths, these little kind of pegs sticking here. So I'm going to go into here, and down below there's this start and end mapping. And if you see, this is at 1. Now if I pull it down, it animates all the way to the end. So there's that. Now maybe I want that to be the end here. That's at 1. Maybe if I bring this one all the way down to 0 and take the start and have it go this way. That's kind of the same thing. Let's see. Maybe I want it to go back. Either way, that's how these work. There we go. That's the opposite. So in order to make a keyframe here, I'm going to I can click I, or I can push this little button over here. And so in this case, I guess maybe I'll just hit the button. So here we are down the timeline at frame 1. I'm going to push this button over here, and there's a keyframe. And then let's say I move it down here to frame 50. So these are frames, not seconds. And I'm going to drag this all the way back here and hit the keyframe button again. Now, if I scrub through this timeline, that's what it looks like. And if I hit spacebar, it'll play for me. So in this case, you know, maybe I don't want it to go back to it there. I actually want it to go from the titles or the campuses to the buttons here. So I could go and I could, you know, hit A on my keyboard, and I could hit X and delete all the keyframes and start over, or I can hit Control Z and go back, and I can actually just take these keyframes, just select one and move it over here, and select this one, move it over here, and it will reverse it. So now if I hit spacebar, it goes from there to there. So that's one way you could do it, or you can go back through and you can change these settings. So maybe if I do that, I hit A for all, hit X to delete the keyframes. Here I am at the starting point, and let's see, I want it to start here. So I hit the button, doop, and then I go down to, let's say, 60 frames, and I pull this up, and I hit the keyframe again. Now it does what I want it to do, it goes there. Okay, and you can choose to do different things. So let's see, what else do I want? I made an origin point for all of these. So one of the things I could do is I'm gonna hit the Z up here to get a big overview, or I can hit my camera, which is also viewing down, and maybe I want these all to spin. So there's a number of ways I could make them spin. I could hit R and spin them around right here. I'm gonna hit Control Z so it goes back. So I could animate them all spinning by, I could select them all individually by hitting Shift and left mouse button, and then hitting R and rotating them all. I can hit Control Z on that. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of make these look like they come from out here and head towards their space. So I want this to be the final resting place for these pie charts. So one strategy I might have is to zoom up to a point, say at 120. And part of this is deciding how long you want your animation to be. In this case, I think I might keep it around 160 frames. So this gets into some math with, let's say I want to have, how many seconds do I want this to be? Maybe I want it to be a pretty short thing. So I'm gonna get my calculator and I'm going to say, let's say it's gonna be 24 frames per second. So 24 times, let's say 6 seconds. It's about 144. I think we can do, let's add another, there we go, 168. There we go. So that'll be 7 seconds. So I'm going to come down here in this little timeline and hit 168. And you can see here is where that is on here. I can pull this up a little bit. There we go. So, so I'm going to stick with that. And one of the things I want to do is I want these to come from out here a little bit and zoom in. So this is the final resting place for them. So I'm going to hit I on my keyboard. I'm going to scroll down to this location, rotation, and scale. That's going to put a keyframe for everything I've selected to be right here. So that's where I want it to be. And I actually think I want all of this to be here. So I'm going to hit I again, and I'm going to hit, these are all individual ones. So I'm going to hit Shift and select them all as well, and hit I again, location, rotation, and scale. So this is going to be the final resting image. This is what it's going to look like when it's done animating. So in this case, and I guess maybe I'll do that the same with these as well. But okay, so I can take, so this is at frame 120. I can zoom back here to, let's say, frame 60. And I can move this, which I could hit G, and I can grab it, and I can scoot it over here. Let's say right about there. And I'm going to hit I again. So now this goes like this. Whoop. And on frame 60, I'm going to do the same thing here. G, grab it, kind of scoot it over here, maybe. Hit I, and do that with these all. I, this, I, this, I, and this. Okay. So now they all come together. That's great. Okay, but what I also want them to rotate, and I want them to shrink. So I've got, if I take all of them and select them, I can choose to rotate them that way. But I can also do something that's kind of useful at times. Is I want to place an empty object and then parent these all to that empty object. This isn't totally necessary, but it is helpful sometimes. So I'm going to go into Add here, and I'm going to scroll down and get an empty object. These are all different ways you can represent the empty object, but it's just empty. So there's my empty object. Okay, so I'm going to, and this kind of trips me up sometimes, got my empty object selected. I'm going to hit Shift and select each one of these, and then I'm going to right mouse click, go down to Parent, and hit Object. So as often it is for me, that was not the right sequence. I'm going to hit Control Z. Okay, after messing with it, you want to select the empty, and then on this side, I think I'm just going to do it here. I'm going to hit Shift and select the top one of these. So basically make sure you select your empty first, and then hit Parent to the object. So now we have this empty that has all the pies in it. So now I can animate the empty. I'm going to just call this, let's see, I'm going to right click on it and rename it the pie controller. There's my pie controller. So if I scroll through this, it still does this. That's great, because inside of this pie controller are all these curves that have their own keyframes. In the pie controller now, I'm going to go back to my camera view, and I am going to take it, and let's see. So they come together right here at 120. I want that to be the way it is. And scroll back to 60 here, and maybe even further to 50. So what I can do is in this little transform panel here, I can say, you know, it's all this is on the empty or the pie controller, and right now everything is set to 1, okay? But I can animate these different elements here. So I want it to grow over time. I'm going to have it grow from invisible to visible. So I'm going to scroll down all these and select 0. And then I'm going to scroll down all these and keyframe that. So now it goes like this, comes together. But I'm also going to, here, back at 50, I'm going to give it a rotation around the z-axis. I'm going to say, how about 360 degrees? And then I'm going to keyframe it. So now, as it comes in, it spins. You could choose to make it spin the other way by going back to keyframe 5 and saying, maybe typing in a negative sign, and make sure to keyframe it again. And you could also, in that case, if you change anything, let's say 90 degrees, you can also hit I and keyframe it that way. But in this case, we're going to do like negative 360 and see what it looks like, and keyframe it. Okay, so now what does it look like? If I hit spacebar, it animates through. Okay, I actually think I liked the just other direction, so we're going to change that again. And keyframe it. So here we go. We've got these from frame 0. These come out. This spins in. And maybe we want this to spin in and for those lines to reach it at the same time. So maybe what we can do is we can look at this one again. When did we have it come in? It reaches them at 60. Okay. So now we can go back and connect our pie controller, and maybe we're going to bring this, and maybe the pie needs to show up before those bars reach it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so what we need to do is actually, we need to move this later number because we want it to look like it is finishing around frame 60, just like those lines. So what happens now is we come in and we have to select these individually and look at what they have now. So we want this all, I'm going to select A. These are all selected. Now I'm going to unselect them, and now I'm going to reselect them. They're all there. I'm going to drag this whole thing over here too. So just make sure it's all on 60. So now it comes out of nowhere. It connects at the same time as those little pegs. But in this case, I also want these buttons to show up. They're kind of not doing anything. So at 60, I want them to be where they are. So I'm pulling this down, and now we've got a toddler in the mix upstairs. So there might be some other additional noises. So I want those little pegs to just kind of pop out. So maybe what I'll do is I'll get out of this camera view, and maybe they pop out right when those pegs reach it. Okay, so I'm going to take these pegs and I'm going to have them pop through. So I'm lowering them, I'm hitting I keyframe it, and there they go, they pop up. Maybe we want that to be like real fast. Just give it 10 frames to pop up. Okay, there we go. So let's look at this again. Here's what we have going on, hitting the space bar, and there they go, they pop up. Maybe we want them to like even kind of bulge for a moment, like look sort of bigger than they are. I'm going to this geometry tab here, and remember this is the depth. So let's say that we have them come up at 50 and we keyframe that, and at 60 it's the same keyframe, and in the middle, say we make them just a little bit bigger for a second, just to kind of give them a little, make them a little fun. Let's see what 7 looks like. It's a little bit bigger, you can see. I'm going to keyframe that, so it might be a little bit of a subtle difference, but here they kind of come out bigger. It's not quite the right timing, but that's okay. We can select them, and we can kind of maybe move this whole bit just a little bit. Maybe this kind of comes up. Select this middle one and scoot it over here. They come up, and they kind of get big for a second and shrink. All right. So then, what are we going to do with these other things? So we want them to come in. Maybe they want to come in and be visible right there, or maybe right here. There we go. So I'm actually just going to select these two, and I'm going to give them a keyframe right there. I'm going to select these two and give them a keyframe right there, and then I'm going to scrub back to 1. So these are all going to like animate from the other side here. Scoot them out, give them a keyframe, scoot these ones out, select them all, give them a keyframe, and now they come flying in, flying right in. And I think we also need this to come flying in. So let's say give it a keyframe right there at frame 30, and scrub back to 1 and drag it up. Give it a keyframe. So now this is what it looks like. Not going to see anything at first. Guess you got some shadows coming through, but we'll go into material mode just to kind of watch it happen. So there it goes. So maybe that's a little bit fast. It might be, but I think it's okay. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to render this out. So the only thing you have to think about right now is that even though we had it was going to be 6 seconds or 7 seconds, we're actually only animating up until right about 60. So that gives you, let's see, another, couple 60, quite a number of frames without any animation. So maybe that whole front part is a little bit fast, and maybe that's okay. But we could also just call it there and see how fast it goes. Render it out at, say, 100 frames. So the last frames will be kind of just allowing your eyes to rest on it. So let's make it 100 frames. We're going to do that. It'll be a lot easier for everyone to render this out. So I'm going to come up here. This is where render animation is. Now I'm going to double check my film. So what I did was I did choose this spot, you know, and didn't really do much for us before. This doesn't need to have the alpha transparency, so we're going to hit RGB. I'm going to select another folder. I'm actually going to make a new folder here. I'm going to call this one, I've got other pie graphs on here, but pie graph, I give it the date, 21/09/12. And I'm going to accept that one. So that's the choice right there. Hit accept. That's where it's going to go. And it's got PNG right now. This is all fine. There's other ways to render this, but right now we're going to just let it render image by image. So hit render animation and watch what happens. The first image should be pretty empty. Might see a little shadow over here. Yep. Now if I go to my folder, I will find it right here. There's the first render. And we'll come back.